On the day of our family island vacation, my sister, Chloe, climbed over the safety railing just to take a photo. She slipped. In her panic, she dragged me into the ocean with her. The rescue guard was about to save me first, since I was closer to the shore. But Mom suddenly pulled a faded, yellowed piece of paper from her wallet and threw it toward me. Maya, let Chloe get on the rescue boat first. This is our last wish. When I was 7, I didn't have money to buy birthday gifts for my parents. So, I hand drew 100 wish coupons. Each one said, with this coupon, Maya will unconditionally grant Mom and Dad one wish. When Chloe wanted my bedroom, they used one. When Chloe wanted to be an only child, they used another. From then on, I was only allowed to call them Mr. and Mrs. Miller, never Mom and Dad. Even the college tuition I saved from working part-time for 3 years was taken by them. They used the 99th coupon to pay for Chloe's intensive dance academy. Now, this was the last one. I looked at the floating coupon on the water and suddenly stopped struggling. I slipped the only rescue rope onto Chloe and pushed her toward the rescue boat myself. Mom and Dad were too busy wrapping her in blankets and checking her for scratches. No one noticed that my leg had already cramped up. I couldn't even hold onto the floating board anymore. As the rescue boat sped toward the pier, Mom only had time to look back and yell, "Maya, hang in there. We'll be right back." I watched their retreating figures and let out a self-deprecating laugh. When I was 7, I thought that if I fulfilled all 100 wishes, my parents would love me just as much as they loved Chloe. It wasn't until the freezing seawater filled my lungs that I finally understood. Those 100 coupons didn't buy me a single shred of their love. They just used up my entire life. I didn't know how much time had passed. Finally, the sound of an engine came from the distance. The rescue boat was actually coming back. My nose burned, and my numb arms suddenly found a surge of strength.
Mom.
I'm here. The figure on the boat became clearer. Mom was holding a clean, dry blanket in her arms. Looking at that blanket, I couldn't help but smile. So, they hadn't forgotten about me. I even told myself that once I got on the boat, I wouldn't ask why they saved Chloe first. As long as Mom wrapped that blanket around me and gave me a hug, I would pretend nothing had ever happened. But halfway there, the rescue boat suddenly turned. Not far away, on a floating platform that had drifted from the broken pier, came a weak whimpering. It was Waffles. Waffles was Chloe's dog. His leash was tangled in the broken railing. The platform could flip over at any second. Chloe immediately stood up on the boat, crying as she grabbed the rescue guard's arm. "Save Waffles first. He can't swim. He's been terrified of water since he was a puppy. He'll die if he falls in." The guard frowned and pointed toward me. "There's still a person over there. The girl who fell in with you earlier, isn't she your sister?" Chloe froze for a second. Then, she shook her head. "She's not my sister. She's just our housekeeper." Across the crashing waves, I stared at Mom and Dad. I waited for them to deny it, even if they just said, "She is our daughter." But Mom avoided my eyes. Dad just urged impatiently, "Maya knows how to swim. She has a floating board. She won't die anytime soon." The guard still hesitated. "Is she really not your daughter?" This time, Mom finally spoke.
No.
"She's been with us for many years. She just helps around the house. Save the dog first. You can come back for her later." Those casual words drifted through the wind and pierced my ears. I suddenly remembered when Chloe was 12. She said her friends all envied only children. She wanted to be the only child, too. So, my parents used a wish coupon. From that day on, I was banned from calling them Mom and Dad. The first time I forgot and made a mistake, Mom's face went cold. "We promised to grant Chloe's wish," she warned. "Who are you calling Mom?" Later, I learned to call them Thomas and Eleanor. Even when I was burning with a high fever and barely conscious, I never dared to call her Mom again. The coupon was only supposed to be valid for 1 year. But after that year passed, no one ever told me I could call them Mom and Dad again. Gradually, Chloe really became the only daughter in the family. And I became the one who washed clothes, cooked, and cleaned the rooms, someone who didn't even deserve to call them parents. I never thought that years later, they would actually tell a stranger that I was just the housekeeper. The rescue boat veered right in front of me, heading toward the platform where Waffles was trapped. Survival instinct made me wave my arms frantically, trying to get them to see me. But a massive wave crashed down, burying me under the water again. By the time I struggled back to the surface, Dad had already pulled the dog onto the boat. Mom immediately opened the blanket in her arms, carefully wrapping it around Waffles' wet body. The blanket I thought was meant for me was ultimately used to warm Chloe's dog. Chloe held her dog, shaking and crying. Mom and Dad comforted her on both sides. "Don't worry, Waffles is fine. Mom saved both of you." Chloe finally smiled through her tears. No one looked back at me. The guard wanted to steer back toward me, but a sudden gale warning blared over the radio. To keep the rescue boat from capsizing, he had to take the passengers and the dog back to the pier first. The sound of the engine faded away. My bleeding, cut hands could no longer hold onto anything. As the salt water covered my chin, I stopped crying out. They say before you die, you see the happiest moments of your life. Images indeed began to flash before my eyes. Back then, Chloe hadn't been born yet. No matter how busy Dad was, he would always show up at my preschool on time, so I could be the first kid picked up. Mom's phone wallpaper was always me. Her Instagram was filled with my pictures, every post bragging about how I was the best daughter in the world. At night, they would each hold one of my hands and say with a smile, "Maya is Mom and Dad's most precious little girl." When I was 7, I stayed up for nights to draw those 100 wish coupons. When Mom received them, she held me close and kissed me over and over. Dad couldn't bear to use them. He tucked them carefully into his wallet. "Our Maya is so good. How could we ever bear to ask you for anything?" The 7-year-old me could never have guessed. The people who would use these coupons to force me to give up everything, time and time again, would be them. The night Chloe was born, Dad stroked my hair and promised, "This doesn't mean you have less love. It means you have one more sister to love you." But every time Chloe cried, Mom's grip on me would loosen. In the beginning, they just asked me to let Chloe have the hugs. Then it was my birthdays, my toys, and their time. Eventually, even my parents became something I had to give up. During the summer break when I was 8, they took Chloe to an island resort for the first time. I ran to the door with red eyes. "I want to go too." Mom was putting a sun hat on Chloe. She didn't even look up. "Your sister is fragile. Taking 2 kids is too exhausting. You stay at Grandma's this time. We will definitely bring you next time." I stood on the balcony, watching their car disappear at the intersection. That was the first time I was left behind. But it wasn't the last. Every time after that, they always had an excuse to choose Chloe over me. When I was 14, I had acute appendicitis. I was curled up on the floor in agony. When Mom picked up the phone, she was watching Chloe's dance competition. This is her first time on stage. She'll be terrified if she doesn't see us. "You're 14 now. If your stomach hurts, go to the hospital yourself. Stop trying to steal your sister's spotlight." I ended up fainting in front of the apartment lobby. A neighbor called the ambulance. By the time Mom and Dad arrived with Chloe and her trophy, my surgery was already over. Mom didn't ask if I was in pain. Instead, she complained to the nurse. "Maya always exaggerates. She loves making a big deal out of nothing just to get attention." Dad held Chloe's medal in front of my face. "She trained for 6 months for this. As her sister, you should be happy for her." I had just gotten out of surgery and could barely sit up, but I forced myself to say congratulations. Only then were they satisfied. After that, I stopped asking them for help. I went to the hospital alone when I was sick. I walked home in the rain by myself. I stopped waiting for birthday cakes. But they just said, "Maya is much stronger than Chloe. We don't have to worry about her." They used their neglect to teach me independence, and then used that independence as an excuse to never choose me. So, when Mom invited me on this trip 2 weeks ago, I was too excited to sleep. She said over the phone, "This time, the whole family will be together. Not one of us can be missing." I took my annual leave and spent my entire bonus booking their flights. But when we got to the hotel, I found out the 2-bedroom suite only had rooms for them and Chloe. I had to sleep on a rollaway bed in the living room. I couldn't help but ask why they didn't just book another room. Dad's face darkened instantly. "We brought you on vacation, and you're already complaining?" Mom sighed. "We're here to have fun as a family. Do you have to ruin everyone's mood over a room?" During those days, I woke up early to walk the dog, carry their bags, stand in lines, and take photos for them. When registering for the boat tour, the staff asked if I was family. Chloe laughed and said, "No, she's just our dog sitter." Mom and Dad stood right there. Neither of them corrected her. Chloe posted the photos I took on Instagram. A family vacation with waffles. Finally, in the photo, Dad was holding Mom and Chloe was holding the dog in the center. I wasn't in the frame, but I still gave it a quiet like. At least this time, I got to see the same ocean with them. Before the accident, Chloe had climbed over the warning line of the viewing deck just to take a photo. I went to pull her back. When a huge wave hit the rocks, she grabbed me tightly and dragged me down with her. But after she got to safety, they saved her first and then her dog. There, not one can be missing, never actually included me. As my memories faded, my spirit drifted beside them. The rescue team asked one family member to stay behind to help with the search. But Dad said impatiently, "Maya can swim. Nothing will happen to her." Mom was convinced I was just throwing a tantrum because they saved Chloe first. "Don't go looking for her," Mom said. "The more we coddle her, the more she'll use these tantrums to get her way." I touched my empty chest. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I guess once you're dead, you don't feel that heart-wrenching pain anymore. That was a relief. At 1 a.m., Mom's phone suddenly buzzed with an alert. It was my smartwatch. After detecting a severe fall into water with no response, it had automatically sent an emergency location. She glanced at it and swiped to delete. Her watch is still sending locations. She's obviously fine. Just ignore her. But they didn't know. That wasn't me calling for help. It was the watch's automated system sending out one final distress signal after a violent impact went unanswered. The next morning, the rescue team came to the hotel, asking for a recent photo of me. Mom scrolled through her phone for a long time. There were thousands of photos of Chloe, but she couldn't find a single one of my face. In the end, Mom had to give them my ID photo from 3 years ago. The officer couldn't help but ask, "You're her family. How do you not have a single recent photo of her?" Mom's face stiffened. She has an awkward personality. She doesn't like taking photos with us. Chloe chimed in softly. She always thinks we favor me, so she purposely avoids the camera to make people think we exclude her. Floating next to them, I wanted to laugh. I was already dead. And yet, even a reason why I wasn't in any photos had to be explained away by them. The officers pulled up the surveillance footage from the viewing deck to clip a photo of me before I fell. But the video clearly showed Chloe ignoring the warning signs and climbing over the railing. When the wave hit, she was the one who grabbed my clothes and dragged me down. Chloe's face went pale instantly. "You can't post that. If people see this, they'll say I killed her." Mom immediately shielded Chloe in her arms. "Just use the ID photo to find her. Why do you have to ruin my daughter's life?" Dad's face darkened too. "Maya is just temporarily missing. Chloe still has to go to school, get a job, and get married. If you release this video, how is she supposed to live her life?" Just then, Waffles started coughing. Chloe screamed and hugged the dog. "Is there water in his lungs?" Mom and Dad forgot all about the missing person poster. They grabbed the dog to rush to the vet. The officer stopped them. "The person in the water hasn't been found. At least one family member needs to stay to assist." Dad pushed his hand away impatiently. "Searching is your job. What use is it if we stay? Maya can swim, and she has her smartwatch. If she were in real danger, she would have contacted us by now." At the vet, they found out Waffles had only swallowed a little water. While Chloe watched the dog get examined, she scrolled through a video posted by a local Airbnb on TikTok. "Rescued a girl who fell into the water last night. Glad she's safe." The video only showed the back of a woman wrapped in a blanket. Mom instantly remembered the location ping she received last night. It was right near that Airbnb. Chloe covered her mouth. "I knew she made it ashore. She's fine, but she's purposely refusing to contact us." The worry on Dad's face instantly turned into rage. Just to make us feel guilty for saving Chloe first, she wasted all these rescue resources. Mom was shaking with anger. She's loved playing the victim since she was a kid. Now she's even lying to the rescue team. Chloe leaned into Mom's shoulder, playing the sweet sister. "She probably just wanted your attention. When we find her, don't yell at her too hard. Just make her apologize to the rescue team." They immediately drove toward the Airbnb. On the way, they planned how they would punish me. Dad wanted to make me pay for the entire rescue fee. Mom wanted me to publicly clarify that I let go of the floating board myself, so it had nothing to do with Chloe. They were certain I was hiding in a warm room, waiting for them to bow their heads and apologize. But when they reached the rocky shore on the other side of the island, the road was blocked by emergency vehicles. Several rescue workers were carrying a stretcher out from the rocks. It was covered with a white sheet. The rescue captain looked at the ID photo in his hand, then at Mom and Dad. "Are you Maya's family? We just found the body of a young woman on the rocky shore on the other side of the island. We need you to come over and identify her." As soon as the captain finished speaking, Dad's face fell. "What do you mean, a body? Our girl is perfectly fine. Don't curse her first thing in the morning." Mom also instinctively pulled Chloe behind her. "Maya was saved by an Airbnb host last night. We're on our way to pick her up right now." The captain looked at the ID photo on his phone, then at the sleeve peeking out from under the white sheet. The clothes on the deceased match what the missing person was wearing when she fell. Please just come and confirm. But Dad waved his hand impatiently. Plenty of people wear the same clothes. Maya loves using these cheap tricks to scare us. If we go look, she'll think she won. Chloe, with red eyes, gently tugged Mom's sleeve. She must have seen the Airbnb video and is hiding on purpose. She's just mad we saved Waffles and me first. When we find her, I'll apologize to her, okay? She sounded so sensible and wronged. Mom lovingly smoothed her hair. It wasn't your fault to begin with. She was the one who agreed to let you get on the boat first. Using a dead person just to force us to apologize. I can't believe she would go this far. I floated behind them, wanting so badly to remind Mom. This time, I'm not hiding. And I'm not waiting for your apology. Under that white sheet, the person lying there quietly is me. But they didn't look back. Dad pressured the driver to bypass the rescue vehicles and drove straight to the Airbnb. On the way, Mom called my phone over a dozen times. With each unanswered call, her anger grew. Maya, pick up. We already know where you are. If you come out now, we can still talk. If you keep this up, don't ever think about coming back home. Even after the last voicemail, there was still no reply. Mom sneered, throwing her phone into her purse. When we see her, no one is allowed to comfort her first. She only acts this wild because she knows we'll eventually give in. Half an hour later, the car stopped at the Airbnb. Dad pushed the door open and demanded the host hand me over. The host looked completely bewildered. Maya? We don't have any guest named Maya here. Chloe immediately pulled up the TikTok video. It's her. The woman wrapped in a blanket you rescued last night. The host took a look and called upstairs. Soon, a strange woman came down, holding her husband's hand. She only had a similar build to me. Her face, her voice, and her clothes had absolutely nothing to do with me. I sprained my ankle in the shallow water last night, and my husband helped me back, the woman explained, confused. Did you get the wrong person? The anger on Mom's face slowly froze. Refusing to give up, she ran upstairs, shouting my name in every room. Maya, stop hiding. I know you're in here. She knocked on every single door. Still, I wasn't there. Losing his patience, the host slammed the guest log on the table. Since last night, we've only checked in this one injured guest. If the person you're looking for really fell into the ocean, you should go back and help the rescue team. Chloe's face turned pale for a second, but she quickly bit her lip. Maya probably heard we were coming and left early. She has money. She could have gone to another hotel. Dad looked like he had finally grabbed a lifeline. Right. She changed hotels on purpose to make us worry. This island is only so big. Let's see how long she can hide. Just as they were about to leave, hurried footsteps echoed outside. The rescue captain had followed them here. He was holding a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a waterlogged phone, a smartwatch, and a soggy piece of paper that was falling apart from the seawater. The writing on the paper had bled, but Mom instantly recognized the crooked little flower drawn in the bottom right corner. It was the mark the 7-year-old me had made on every single Wish coupon. We found these items near the body, the captain said, his voice heavy. Even if you won't identify her, you must recognize her belongings. The plastic bag was wet. Condensation clung to its inner lining, fogging up the image of the crooked little flower I had drawn with my favorite purple gel pen when I was 7 years old. Through the damp plastic, the ink had bled into a dark, bruised smudge. The yellow paper, once neatly folded and tucked away in the deepest pocket of Thomas's leather wallet, was now nothing more than a wet, fibrous clump of pulp. Thomas stared at it. His hand, still holding the keys to our rental car, froze midair. This. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. She reached out, her manicured fingers hovering over the plastic bag, but she didn't touch it. This is just a piece of paper. Anyone could have dropped a piece of yellow paper. Maya probably lost it. She's always been careless with her things. Mrs. Miller, the rescue captain said, his voice dropping into a low, professional register that carried no warmth. The watch inside this bag is registered to Maya Miller. The emergency contact number matches yours. And the deceased was wearing a silver ring on her right thumb. It has the initials MM engraved on the inside. A suffocating silence fell over the small lobby of the Airbnb. Chloe, who had been cradling Waffles in her arms, suddenly let out a sharp, nervous giggle. That's impossible. Maya is just trying to scare us. She probably dropped her watch on purpose when she got out of the water. She knew we'd find it and feel bad. She's always been jealous of me, Captain. You don't know what she's like. The captain didn't look at Chloe. He kept his eyes locked on Eleanor and Thomas. "We need you to come to the medical examiner's vehicle," he said flatly.
Now.
My spirit floated just above them, drifting slightly with the draft from the open door. I looked down at Eleanor's face. For the first time in years, I saw a crack in her perfect, polished composure. A pale, sickly gray color began to creep up her neck, settling into the hollows of her cheeks. Thomas didn't say a word. He slowly pocketed his car keys and walked out the door, his boots dragging against the gravel driveway. Eleanor followed him, her hand gripping Chloe's shoulder so tightly that Chloe winced. We walked, or rather, they walked, and I drifted back down the winding dirt road toward the rocky shore. The wind had died down, leaving the ocean flat and dull under a heavy gray sky. The emergency vehicle was parked near the edge of the cliffs. Next to it, on a metal gurney beneath the shade of a temporary canopy, lay a shape covered by a heavy white sheet. I looked at the sheet. It was a strange feeling, looking at the physical container I had inhabited for 24 years. It looked so small. Without the breath in my lungs, without the constant, anxious tension that used to keep my shoulders hunched, I was just a quiet mound under a piece of fabric. The medical examiner, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, looked up as we approached. "Are you the parents?" she asked. "Yes," Thomas said, his voice unusually hoarse. "But I'm telling you, there's been a mistake. Our daughter is a strong swimmer. She's..." The examiner didn't argue. She simply reached down and pulled back the top half of the sheet. Eleanor gasped. It wasn't a loud sound, just a sudden, sharp intake of air, as if she had been slapped. There I was. My skin was the color of curdled milk, tinged with a faint, ghostly blue around my temples and fingernails. My hair, which I had spent so much time drying and curling before the trip because Eleanor said I looked shabby in photos, was a tangled, salty mess clinging to my forehead. But what caught Thomas's eye were my hands. My fingernails were torn to the quick, raw and bleeding from where I had tried to claw my way onto the sharp, volcanic rocks after the floating board drifted away. My right leg was frozen in a slight, unnatural bend, the permanent mark of the violent cramp that had dragged me under. "Maya?" Eleanor whispered. She took a step forward, her hand reaching out instinctively, but then she drew it back, tucking it against her chest as if she had been burned.
No.
"No, this isn't. Why does she look like that?" Drowning causes rapid hypothermia in these waters, especially after prolonged exposure, the examiner said, her tone devoid of judgment but entirely clinical. The lacerations on her hands suggest she fought very hard to climb the rocks. But with the cramp in her leg and the weight of her wet clothing, she simply didn't have the leverage. "She fought," Thomas repeated, his voice cracking. He looked down at my raw, ruined fingers. I remembered those final minutes. The water had been so cold it felt like liquid fire in my veins. Every time I tried to grab the wet rocks, the barnacles sliced through my skin, but I kept grabbing anyway because a small, stupid part of me still wanted to go home. I still wanted to see if they would be waiting for me at the pier with a dry towel. "Why didn't she use the floating board?" Eleanor asked, her voice rising, tinged with a desperate, defensive anger. "We left her with a floating board. She had it right there." "The rescue footage from the deck shows otherwise," the captain said, stepping up behind them. He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. The video began to play. It was the raw, unedited security footage from the viewing deck. On the screen, Chloe was climbing over the safety railing, laughing as she posed for a selfie. I walked over, my face tense, reaching out to pull her back. Then, the rogue wave hit. The camera captured the exact moment Chloe slipped. In her blind panic, she didn't just fall. She lunged forward and grabbed the collar of my shirt, dragging me over the railing with her. In the water, the rescue boat arrived. The footage showed me struggling, my arms flailing, while Chloe screamed. Then, the yellow piece of paper flew from the boat. The camera zoomed in. You could clearly see me look at the paper, then look up at Eleanor's face on the boat. My shoulders slumped. The frantic struggle in my limbs simply stopped. With agonizing clarity, the video showed me swimming toward Chloe, pushing the only rescue rope over her head, and then using my remaining strength to shove her toward the boat. After that, the boat sped away. The camera kept rolling. It showed me alone in the water. I held onto the floating board for 3 minutes. Then, the dog, Waffles, whimpered from the platform. The video showed the rescue boat returning. It showed Chloe pointing at the dog. It showed Thomas and Eleanor looking directly in my direction, then turning the boat away. As the boat moved toward the dog, a massive wave, the one that finally broke my hold, swelled. The floating board was ripped from my hands. I went under. When I came back up, my arms were moving slower. I waved once. Just once. But on the boat, Thomas was already pulling waffles out of the water, and Eleanor was wrapping him in the white blanket. Nobody looked back. The video ended with the empty, gray surface of the ocean, the rescue boat disappearing into the mist. The silence in the medical examiner's tent was deafening. Chloe's face was entirely bloodless. She stared at the screen, her lips trembling. I didn't mean to drag her. It was an accident. I was scared. And she wanted to save me. She gave me the rope. She gave you the rope because your mother used her last wish, the captain said. His voice was cold, harder than the volcanic rocks. And then, when you had the chance to bring the boat back for her, you told my men she was your housekeeper. You told them she was a dog sitter. You told them she could swim. We didn't know. Eleanor cried, her voice cracking into a shrill, desperate shriek. She grabbed Thomas's arm, shaking him. Thomas, tell them. We didn't know she was in danger. She always swims so well. She was a lifeguard in high school. She was never a lifeguard, Eleanor, Thomas said quietly. His voice was hollow, completely drained of the anger and authority he usually carried. He looked at Eleanor, his eyes wide and blank. She failed the swim test in middle school because she got panicked in the deep end. Don't you remember? You scolded her for wasting the registration fee. Eleanor froze. No. She told me she loved the water. She told you that because you and Chloe wanted to go to the water park every summer, and she didn't want to be left behind at Grandma's house again, Thomas whispered. He stepped closer to the gurney, his hand shaking violently as he finally reached out and touched my cold, stiff forearm. The moment his skin met mine, a shudder ran through his entire body. Maya, he whispered. It was the first time in 10 years he had called me by my name without a tone of irritation or demand. Maya, wake up. Stop this. It's not funny anymore. I watched him. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering desire for him to hug me. The coldness of the ocean had settled deep into my soul, freezing away the desperate, yearning little girl who had spent 17 years trying to buy her way back into this family. The body will be transported to the local morgue, the medical examiner said, gently pulling the sheet back over my face, shutting out the gray light. We will need you to sign the release forms and arrange for transportation back to the mainland. Transportation. Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. But our flight is tomorrow. We have to go back. I have my dance showcase next week. If we stay here, I'll miss it. Thomas slowly turned his head to look at Chloe. For her entire life, Chloe had been the center of his universe. She was the fragile one, the talented one, the one who needed to be protected from every harsh draft and minor inconvenience. But now, looking at her, Thomas's eyes held a strange, terrible coldness. Your sister is dead, Chloe, he said, his voice flat. But it wasn't my fault. Chloe screamed, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. She's the one who gave me the rope. She wanted to. And she's the one who stayed in the water. Why does everyone look at me like I did something wrong? Eleanor tried to reach out to comfort her, but Thomas stepped between them. Sign the papers, Eleanor, he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. I'm going to the hotel to pack her things. The hotel suite was quiet when we returned. The scent of Chloe's expensive lavender perfume still lingered in the air, mixed with the damp, salty smell of Waffle's fur. In the living room, the small, narrow rollaway bed I had slept on for the past 3 days stood in the corner, its sheets slightly crumpled. Thomas walked over to it. On the tiny nightstand next to the rollaway bed lay my black duffel bag. It was cheap, bought from a discount store years ago when I moved out of their house to live in a cramped college dorm. Thomas opened it. Inside, there were no expensive clothes, no luxury skincare products like the ones cluttering Eleanor and Chloe's vanity. There were just 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, a worn-out pair of sneakers, and a small, leather-bound notebook. Thomas picked up the notebook. He sat down on the edge of the squeaky rollaway bed, his knees nearly touching his chest on the low frame. I sat down beside him, though the mattress didn't sink under my weight. He opened the notebook. It wasn't a diary. It was a budget ledger. For 3 years, I had kept track of every single penny I earned from my 3 part-time jobs while carrying a full course load at university. September, $450 saved. Skipped dinners on Tuesdays and Thursdays. October, $510 saved. Sold old textbooks. November, $480 saved. Took extra night shifts at the library. On the last page of the ledger, there was a double underline under a final figure, $15,000. And right beneath it, written in my neat, careful handwriting, Chloe's Dance Academy tuition. Paid in full. Coupon number 99 used. Thomas's fingers trembled so hard he nearly tore the page. He knew about the money. He and Eleanor had sat me down at the kitchen table 3 years ago, showing me the brochure for the Intensive Dance Academy in New York. They had told me how much Chloe wanted it, how it was her dream, but how they were just short of the tuition fee. Then, Eleanor had placed the 99th yellow coupon on the table. "Maya, you're so smart. You can easily get a student loan for your own classes," Eleanor had said, her voice sweet and coaxing. "But Chloe only has this one chance. You promised, remember? Unconditionally." I had looked at the coupon. I had looked at my hands, calloused from scrubbing floors and carrying heavy trays at the diner. And I had signed the check over to them. Thomas stared at the ledger for a long, long time. A single, heavy tear escaped his eye and fell onto the paper, smudging the ink of the word paid. "What did we do?" he whispered to the empty room. "Eleanor, what did we do?" The door to the suite clicked open. Eleanor and Chloe walked in, followed by Waffles, who was whimpering quietly. Eleanor looked exhausted, her makeup smeared, her hair flat. But as soon as she saw Thomas sitting on my bed, holding my notebook, her defensive wall went back up. "We need to call a lawyer, Thomas," she said, shutting the door behind her. The rescue captain was very aggressive. He whispered something to the local police about negligent endangerment because of the video. "We need to make sure they don't release that footage to the public. If Chloe's school sees that." "The school?" Thomas asked, not looking up from the ledger. "Yes. They have a very strict code of conduct. If they think Chloe had anything to do with what happened, they could revoke her scholarship." Eleanor walked over, her voice rising in panic. "And the media? This is a small island. The local news is already asking questions about the drowning incident. We have to protect Chloe." "Protect Chloe," Thomas repeated. He finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot and dark. "From what, Eleanor?" "From the truth." "What is that supposed to mean?" Eleanor snapped, her face flushing red. "Are you blaming us? Maya is the one who drew those coupons. She's the one who made that promise. She gave Chloe the rope of her own free will. Because you threw the coupon at her." Thomas roared, suddenly standing up. The sheer force of his voice made Chloe jump, and Waffles let out a sharp bark, hiding behind her legs. "You threw it in the water, Eleanor." She was drowning, and instead of throwing her a life vest, instead of yelling at the guard to pull her up first, you threw a piece of yellow paper from 17 years ago and told her to die so Chloe could live. "I didn't tell her to die," Eleanor screamed back, tears of anger streaming down her face. I thought the guard would go back for her. How was I supposed to know the platform with the dog would drift away? How was I supposed to know there would be a gale warning?" "You didn't care," Thomas said, his voice dropping back into that terrifying, icy quietness. "We didn't care. We haven't cared about her since the day Chloe was born." "That's not true," Eleanor cried, though her voice lacked conviction. "We brought her on this trip, didn't we? We paid for her flights. We wanted her here." Thomas reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He opened Instagram and held it up to Eleanor's face. It was the photo Chloe had posted. A family vacation with Waffles. "Finally. Where is she, Eleanor?" Thomas asked, his voice shaking. "Show me where Maya is in this photo. Show me one photo on your phone from the last 5 years that has her face in it." Eleanor stared at the screen. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "We made her sleep on a rollaway bed in the living room while we slept in the master suites," Thomas said, his tears finally flowing freely. "She spent the last 3 days carrying our bags, walking Chloe's dog, and taking photos of us smiling. She was our housekeeper, Eleanor. Just like Chloe told the guard. Just like you told the police." He let out a broken, choking sob and fell back onto my bed, burying his face in his hands. "We killed her," he wept. "We killed our own daughter." Chloe stood by the door, clutching her dog tightly. She looked at her parents, her expression a mix of fear and growing resentment. "You guys are being so dramatic," she muttered, her voice trembling. "Maya's always been the favorite anyway. You guys always talked about how strong she was, how she didn't need anything. I'm the one who needs help. I'm the one who has to live with this." Thomas didn't look at her. He didn't say a word. He just sat on my cheap, squeaky bed, holding my budget ledger against his chest, weeping for the girl he had forgotten to love. The next few days passed in a blur of gray, heavy silence. The Miller family did not take their scheduled flight home. Instead, they stayed in a cheap, rundown motel near the harbor, waiting for the local authorities to finish the paperwork to release my body. The luxury resort suite had become too expensive, and besides, the hotel management had politely asked them to leave after the local news began reporting on the story. The headlines were brutal. Family abandons daughter to save dog in island drowning tragedy. A local tourist had recorded a video of the rescue boat arriving at the pier, the moment Eleanor wrapped Waffles in the white blanket while Thomas hurried Chloe away, entirely ignoring the rescue guards who were asking about the second girl left in the water. The video went viral. Within 48 hours, the internet had done what it always does. They found Chloe's Instagram. They found the family photo where I was missing. They found the school she attended, the dance academy she had enrolled in using my savings. The backlash was swift and merciless. Chloe's phone buzzed constantly, a relentless stream of hateful comments and direct messages. Monster. You let your sister drown for a dog. I hope you never dance again. She spent the days locked in the motel bathroom, crying and throwing up, while Eleanor desperately tried to make calls to public relations firms and lawyers, using what little money they had left. But no one wanted to touch them. The surveillance video from the viewing deck had been leaked by an anonymous source within the local police department. The footage of Chloe dragging me over the railing, followed by Eleanor throwing the yellow coupon into the water, was playing on every major news outlet. We have to sue them, Eleanor screamed at Thomas, who was sitting on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the wall. The police had no right to release that video. It's defaming our family. It's ruining Chloe's future. Thomas didn't look at her. Since the day at the medical examiner's tent, he had stopped speaking to Eleanor. He stopped speaking to Chloe. He only spoke to the funeral coordinator and the shipping company responsible for transporting my casket back to our hometown. Thomas, are you listening to me? Eleanor grabbed his arm, her eyes wild, her hair unwashed and greasy. They canceled Chloe's scholarship. The academy called this morning. They said she is no longer welcome there. They're citing a morality clause in the contract. Thomas slowly pulled his arm out of her grip. Good, he said quietly. Eleanor gasped. What did you say? I said good, Thomas repeated, his voice empty. That money wasn't hers to begin with. It belonged to the daughter who died to give it to her. It's only fair she doesn't get to use it. She is your daughter too. Eleanor shrieked. How can you be so cold? Chloe is alive. We have to focus on the living. Is she? Thomas asked, finally looking at Eleanor. His eyes were hollow, surrounded by deep, dark circles. Because every time I look at Chloe, all I see is the girl who dragged Maya into the ocean and then lied about her name to save herself. I don't see my daughter anymore, Eleanor. I just see a stranger. From the bathroom, the sound of Chloe's sobbing grew louder. But neither of them went to comfort her. The infinite well of warmth and protection they had maintained for her for 24 years had finally run dry, evaporated by the cold reality of what their indulgence had cost. The funeral was a small, quiet affair. No one came. Our relatives, who had once praised Eleanor and Thomas for having such a talented, beautiful family, had suddenly found themselves too busy to attend. Our neighbors, who used to wave to me as I walked Waffles in the early mornings, looked away when they saw Thomas and Eleanor loading my casket into the hearse. The church was empty, save for the three of them and the priest, who looked uncomfortable reading the standard service for a young woman he had never met. I sat on the altar, my legs dangling over the edge, watching them. Eleanor sat in the front pew, dressed in a black designer dress that looked too loose on her now. She had lost weight over the last week. Her eyes were fixed on the polished mahogany casket, but she didn't cry. Her grief was stiff, defensive, and angry. Chloe sat next to her, wearing large sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her head bowed. She looked less like a grieving sister and more like a criminal waiting for a sentence to be read. Thomas sat on the far end of the pew, leaving a wide, empty space between himself and his wife. He held a small, black velvet box in his hands. Inside that box, I knew, were the remains of the 99 yellow coupons he had recovered from their safe at home. When the service ended, the priest gestured for the family to say their final goodbyes before the burial. Thomas stood up first. He walked slowly to the casket, his steps heavy. He placed his hand on the cold wood. I'm sorry, Maya, he whispered, his voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I didn't protect you. I didn't even try. He opened the black velvet box. Inside, the faded yellow papers, written in the shaky handwriting of a 7-year-old, lay in a neat stack. With this coupon, Maya will unconditionally grant Mom and Dad one wish. Thomas took a lighter from his pocket. Right there, in front of the altar, he struck the flame and held it to the corner of the stack. The paper was old and dry. It caught instantly. The yellow coupons curled and blackened, the purple ink of my crooked little flowers vanishing into the yellow flames. Thomas held the burning stack until the fire reached his fingertips, then dropped the ashes into a brass bowl on the pedestal next to the casket. "We release you," Thomas whispered, his tears falling into the ashes. "We don't have any wishes left. You don't owe us anything anymore." Eleanor watched the paper burn, her face twisting into a mask of pure agony. For years, those coupons had been her ultimate leverage. They were the shield she used to justify her selfishness. Every time she felt a pang of guilt for taking my room, my money, or my parents' love, she would look at those coupons and tell herself, "Maya promised." It was her choice. But now, they were nothing but ash. The shield was gone, leaving her entirely exposed to the weight of her own cruelty. She stood up, her legs shaking, and walked to the casket. "Maya," she sobbed, finally breaking down. She collapsed against the mahogany wood, her hands clawing at the polished surface. "Please, please don't leave us like this. I love you. I've always loved you. I was just trying to keep everyone happy. Please." I watched her weep. I waited for some echo of the little girl inside me to feel a twinge of pity, to want to reach out and wipe her tears. But there was nothing. The girl who would have done anything for that hug, the girl who would have spent her entire life working 3 jobs just to see Eleanor smile, had died in the freezing Atlantic. After the funeral, the house became a tomb. Thomas moved into the guest room, the small, cramped room that used to be mine before they gave it to Chloe for her dance wardrobe. He refused to sleep in the master bedroom with Eleanor. He spent his evenings sitting in the dark, looking through my old school folders, touching the dust on my old books, trying to find some trace of the daughter he had spent 17 years ignoring. Eleanor tried to keep up appearances. She spent hours on the phone with lawyers, trying to fight the public backlash, but her efforts were useless. Her boutique business, which she had spent a decade building, went bankrupt within a month. People refused to buy from the woman who let her daughter drown. The windows of her shop were spray-painted with the word "monster" so many times that the landlord eventually evicted her. And Chloe, without her dance academy, without her friends, and with her name ruined across the internet, she became a ghost in her own right. She rarely left her room. The girl who used to spend hours filming videos of herself dancing now flinched at the sound of a camera shutter. Even Waffles, the dog they had chosen over me, seemed to sense the rot in the house. He spent his days hiding under the dining table, whimpering quietly, refusing to eat. One evening, about 6 months after the accident, Eleanor was cleaning out the kitchen drawers. She was looking for a set of keys when her hand brushed against something small and hard at the very back of the drawer. She pulled it out. It was an old, dusty prescription bottle. The label on the bottle was faded, but Eleanor's eyes widened as she read the date and the name. Maya Miller, August 2016. It was the pain medication I had been prescribed after my appendicitis surgery, the one I had undergone alone at 14 while they watched Chloe's dance competition. The bottle was completely full. Eleanor held the bottle in her hand, staring at the unbroken plastic seal. Suddenly, she remembered that night. She had come home late with Chloe and Thomas, carrying Chloe's giant trophy. I had been lying on my bed, pale and shivering, clutching my stomach in silence. Eleanor had tossed the prescription bottle onto my nightstand. "The doctor said you need to take these every 4 hours," she had said carelessly, already turning to walk out of the room to help Chloe polish her trophy. "But don't take too many. You always make a big deal out of nothing. Just sleep it off." I had never opened the bottle. At 14, I had realized that if I took those pills, if I showed them I was in pain, they would only call me dramatic. They would only accuse me of trying to steal Chloe's spotlight. So, I had hidden the bottle at the back of the kitchen drawer, choosing to bear the agony of my healing incision in absolute silence, just to prove to them that I could be strong. Eleanor stared at the full bottle of pills. A terrible, choking sound escaped her throat. She fell to her knees on the cold kitchen floor, the plastic bottle slipping from her fingers and rolling across the tiles. She realized it then. They hadn't just neglected me in my final moments. They had spent my entire life teaching me that my pain didn't matter. They had trained me, step by step, year by year, to stay silent while I suffered. And when the water rose over my head, I had simply done what they had spent 17 years teaching me to do. I had stayed silent. I had stopped asking for help. I had let go. My spirit stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching Eleanor weep on the floor. The yellowed walls of the house, the smell of Chloe's stale perfume, the heavy silence of the rooms, none of it held any power over me anymore. I looked down at my hands. They were no longer blue or raw. They were light, almost transparent, drifting like smoke in the warm evening air. I didn't hate them. Hate is a heavy thing, a tie that binds you to the people who hurt you. and I was so tired of being bound. The 100 wishes were gone. The coupons had burned to ash. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to carry their luggage. I didn't have to walk their dog. I didn't have to let Chloe have my room, or my savings, or my life. I was finally free. I turned away from the weeping woman on the floor, away from the quiet, broken father sitting in the dark room, and walked out the front door. The night air was cool and sweet. The stars above were bright, reflecting off the quiet surface of the distant ocean. I didn't look back.